Good morning, everyone. Allah Apa. Greetings from London, and it's a pleasure for me to start the 11th day of the fast with you all. We're more than halfway through this blessed month. I hope that it's going well and that we're making the most of this special gift and that it may be accepted. The theme of today well fits the spirit of the fast. Learning as a habit of the mind. How can we approach all aspects of life with curiosity, reflection, and an open mind? In fact, the fast perfectly embodies and is permeated by, I believe, the attitude of learning, an attitude that each one of us is called to observe during this month. Did you know that remaining open to continuous learning is only one of the 16 habits of the mind? Continuous learning is a combination of confidence and curiosity. And the habit of learning, it is a lifelong process that promotes development and application of skills. Why are these habits important? Because they help us with the tools to handle complexity, ambiguity, and uncertainty. They foster adaptability, resilience, and an open mind. And they help us stay curious, reflective, and responsive to everything. So ultimately, learning is not just academic, is not only a skill, but it's a spiritual endeavor. To build character, acquire virtues, and serve humanity. To have a learning attitude also means to be humble in our search for truth, and to recognize what we need to unlearn in order to progress spiritually and find the truth. And I think children are our best examples and role model, as they embody that curiosity for life that make them open to any experience they have. And children need teachers, and the most important ones are the divine teachers that guide us to take care of our spiritual, higher nature. I now would like to share a passage from the Bahá'í writings that I think is well connected to the theme of learning. Let each morn be better than its eve, and each morrow richer than its yesterday. Every day in the morning when arising, you should compare today with yesterday and see in what condition you are. If you see your belief is stronger and your heart more occupied with God and your love increased and your freedom from the world greater, then thank God and ask for the increase of these qualities. You must begin to pray and repent for all that you have done which is wrong, and you must implore and ask for help and assistance that you may become better than yesterday, so that you may continue to make progress. There is a story I'd like to share with you that I believe reflects the virtues of thirst for knowledge and learning. In the early 1860s, in the holy city of Shiraz, there lived a respected merchant and descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, the maternal uncle of the Bab. He had known the Bab not as a distant religious figure, but as a child within his own extended family, gentle, courteous, refined in manner, and marked by a quiet dignity that drew affection from all who met him. When in 1844 his nephew declared himself to be the promised Qaim of Islam, the shock rippled through Persia. For the uncle, it struck even deeper. The one making this staggering claim was not a stranger. He was family. He was the youth whose character he had admired, whose integrity he could not doubt. Yet, love alone could not resolve the questions rising within him. From childhood, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad had been nourished on the prophecies of Islam. He had heard of the signs that would accompany the advent of the Qaim: cosmic upheavals, the sounding of a trumpet, the darkening of heavenly bodies, the appearance of unmistakable power and glory. The Promised One, as commonly understood, would establish justice with visible authority and sweep away corruption in a single, triumphant act. But what he saw instead was persecution. The Bab was denounced by clerics, imprisoned in remote fortresses, and finally executed. His followers were hunted down and massacred. The land was filled not with visible dominion, but with suffering. If this was the fulfillment of prophecy, it bore little resemblance to what generations had anticipated. The uncle's heart became a battleground of loyalty and hesitation. He could not dismiss the nobility of the Bab's life, nor could he easily abandon the interpretations of prophecy that had shaped his understanding for decades. His doubts were not born of hostility. They were the doubts of a sincere man trying to reconcile faith with events that defied expectation. Years passed. The Bab's movement endured despite relentless opposition. Among his most prominent followers was Baha'u'llah, a nobleman who had suffered imprisonment and exile for his allegiance. By 1861, Baha'u'llah was residing in Baghdad, and his presence had become a source of guidance for many bewildered Babis. Still seeking clarity, Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad journeyed to Baghdad. He went as a man burdened with unresolved questions. If this nephew had truly been the Promised One, how were the prophecies to be understood? Why had the signs not unfolded in the literal manner expected? Where was the outward glory, the visible triumph? He presented his questions directly. In response, over the course of 2 days and 2 nights, Baha'u'llah revealed what would become the Kitab-e-Ghan, the Book of Certitude. The answer Baha'u'llah offered did not dismiss prophecy. It reinterpreted it. He explained that in every age, people had failed to recognize God's messenger because they clung to the literal readings of symbolic language. When viewed in this light, the days of the Bab had indeed been filled with signs. Hearts had been transformed. Thousands had arisen with courage and devotion unknown before. Religious certainties had been shaken to their core. The upheaval was real, but it had occurred in the realm of spirit. For Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad, this explanation struck at the root of his struggle. His difficulty had never been with the character of his nephew. It had been with the apparent mismatch between prophecy and reality. The Book of Certitude resolved that tension by showing that the mismatch lay not in the event, but in human expectation. Thus, the story of Haji Mirza Sayyid Muhammad is the story of a sincere believer confronted with a test of understanding. Through the Book of Certitude, Baha'u'llah illuminated that choice not with coercion, but with explanation, patience, and insight. And now I leave you with the story of George Jacob Augur, disciple of Abdul Baha. I hope you like it. Thank you for tuning in. Have a blessed day.
George Jacob Augur was born with a mind made for precision and a heart made for compassion. At Yale, where the nation's finest physicians were trained, he excelled with quiet brilliance. Professors predicted a long and prestigious career for him. Appointments, research positions, influence, respect. And for a time, that seemed to be his path. He served at the New Haven State Hospital, surrounded by colleagues who admired him, by institutions that promised security. But inside George, something was restless. He felt suffocated by a world that valued prestige over compassion, competition over healing. In a move that shocked his colleagues, he walked away from the comfortable future laid out before him. He packed up his life and moved to California, not for opportunity, but because his spirit needed space. He was a healer in search of a truth large enough to fill the ache inside him. In California, he embraced homeopathy, convinced it offered a gentler, more humane form of care. His medical peers were scandalized. They rejected him, mocked his decision, withdrew friendship and professional support. George lost standing, reputation, even livelihood. He opened a small office in downtown Oakland, all while giving 15 years of dedicated service at Fabiola Hospital. In 1892, Arthur married Ruth Dyer, and together they welcomed their son, Morris Curtis Augur. In 1898, the young family began a new chapter in Honolulu. They lived simply, with no great ambitions except to be of service. In 1905, Ruth's sister became a Baha'i. By 1907 to 1909, George and Ruth themselves embraced the faith, and instantly their little Honolulu house became the spiritual center of the islands. Every week they opened their doors, offering tea, warmth, prayers, and fellowship to neighbors, friends, soldiers, immigrants, Hawaiian families, and travelers from distant shores. It was one of the earliest Baha'i homes in the Pacific, a lamp glowing on a lonely ocean. Living so far from any major Baha'i community, George often felt isolated. He wrote to Abdu'l-Baha from Hawaii, asking for guidance, offering his service, sharing his longing. Between 1909 and 1913, he received 6 tablets. He carried them in his pocket, worn soft from rereading. At community gatherings, he would sometimes read them aloud, his voice trembling, as if the master were speaking directly to the little circle of believers in his home. Those tablets were not just guidance, they were his lifeline. In 1906, George traveled briefly to Japan. Something in the Japanese people touched him profoundly: their discipline, courtesy, refinement, and spiritual depth. When he returned to Honolulu, he could not shake the feeling that he had glimpsed a destiny he didn't yet understand. In 1913, he finally wrote to Abdu'l-Baha, "I wish to arise and go teach in Japan." When the master's reply arrived, George wept.
Travel thou to Japan, and lay there the foundation of the cause of God. Japan has great capacity. I hope thou wilt become assisted in this.
Those words rewrote his life. In the years that followed, George made 3 more trips to Japan. In June 1914, George arrived in Japan as the first Baha'i pioneer. He traveled alone. He had no contacts, no resources, no community, nothing but determination and the blessing of the master. He rented a small room and began offering tea to neighbors, meeting people in parks, libraries, train stations, bookstores, and English classes.
これはいくらですか?
He taught one person at a time. He listened more than he spoke. He shared the teachings with gentleness and respect. This was how the Baha'i faith took root in Japan, in living rooms, in quiet conversations, in George's unwavering patience. Then the world fell apart. Months after George arrived, the First World War erupted. Foreigners fled, supply ships halted, suspicion, fear, and tension spread. But George refused to leave. He walked through a hostile world with calm dignity, continuing to teach privately, quietly, faithfully. Alone, but devoted, he held the thread of the master's command, lay the foundation. He returned to Honolulu, but the mission the master had given him remained the silent compass of his soul. A dear friend tried to persuade him that it would be a mistake to return to Japan at that time. Dr. Augur picked up the hidden words and opened it at random. These were the words that met his eyes.
My servant, free thyself from the fetters of this world, and loose thy soul from the prison of self. Seize thy chance, for it will come to thee no more.
These words left no doubt in Dr. Augur's mind, and in 1916, George returned with Ruth to Japan. They settled in Zushi, a quiet coastal town. Their tiny home, perched between sea and pine-covered hills, became a sanctuary. Neighbors came for tea. Young people visited for conversation. Seekers gathered for simple presentations about spiritual truth. George and Ruth created a center of love that felt like family. Despite age and exhaustion, George's dedication only grew. In 1918, when many men his age were preparing for retirement, George and Ruth returned to Japan for a final time, determined to continue their work. He was in his mid-60s. He was often ill, but he would not stop. He had been asked to lay a foundation, and he would see it through. When the Augurs returned to Honolulu in 1919, they simply resumed service as if nothing had changed. Their home, once again, became the heart of the Hawaiian Bahá'í community. George welcomed each soul as if welcoming a treasure. In the mid-1920s, he and Ruth moved to a tiny beach apartment in Waikiki. Life was quiet. Money was scarce. His health was fading. Yet even then, as the sun set over the Pacific, George would stand by the shore and say softly,
If only I had more strength, I would go again.
even old age could not dim the fire lit by the master's command. In 1927, George suffered a stroke and passed peacefully on the island he had loved and served for decades. He was buried in Oahu Cemetery under the warm Hawaiian sky. When news reached Haifa, Shoghi Effendi wrote,
He was deeply grieved to hear of the death of Dr. Augur. Surely he is now where he would much love to be.
Later, The Guardian named him among the disciples of Abdu'l-Baha. George Jacob Augur crossed oceans to teach a lonely handful of souls. He brought the faith to Hawaii and then to Japan. He was the first light of a dawn that would one day rise across the entire East. He was truly the first light in the East, a man who answered the Master's call with his whole life.